This is ScarfApp, and today we are going to learn how to build a like button for it. My name is Carla Fernandez. I am a digital product designer and I help you turn your ideas into real products. For the challenge today, we will be using Figma, Airtable, and Bravo Studio. And with this setup, it was impossible for me to build a like function. We introduced them Comnoco, and to tell you a little bit more about it, I invite Stuart.
Thanks, Carla. So yes, I'm Stuart, the founder of Comnoco. My background's in tech. I sold my last business, which was focused on high volume document and communication creation for enterprises. And while I was doing that, I sort of realized and had this vision that I wanted to bring the power of the sort of enterprise no-code systems that we were selling and implementing. That was before no-code was known as no-code. And yeah, I wanted to bring those capabilities to the world, to the mass market, and to who are now known as the no-coders of the world. And there are loads of really exceptional no-code front ends and app builders, obviously. But the options become quite limited on the back end for back ends that are truly no code. They either quickly fall back to code or they're tied to sort of built-in and quite limited databases. So we set out and we have built Comnoco to be more like any programming language, which means that it is able to work with any database and any front end. It gives you sort of total freedom and no data lock-in. And on top of that, we made it so it scales seamlessly. You don't really have to think about it at all. You just write your process and deploy it. And we tried really, really hard to make it able to allow you to program to really granular levels without having to resort to any code or scripting. So you can do it all through our sort of telescopic block interface, and you can keep peeling back the layers and adding more logic and integrations to make it do whatever you need and want it to do. And we also added things like logging, error handling, debugging. It's all in there. You know, our aim is to be spoken about in the same sentence as programming languages. So it is a no-code backend powerhouse, and it's getting even more powerful as the days go by. So yeah, that's a little bit on the background of Comnoco.
Thank you, Stuart. So let's do some setup right now. I log into my Bravo account, choose my app, go to the three dots here on the side and choose versioning. So you see that anything that I make change right now won't be visible in the live app that you see on the right side. Don't need to click on it, just close. So now any change I make in the Figma file that you'll be presenting here in Bravo Studio, you'll be just visible on Bravo Vision. And that's the best way for you to do any alteration on your live app. Let's start by adding the button to the Figma file. In here in the Figma file, what I did was to create an instance. So this is a variant, so I called it like. And inside it, I have a value that is set for default when it's off, and active when it's on. So these two values will be used later on to set like or not liked or like an empty on Comnoco. Inside my item list, I add that like button with a tag that's called state set like. And this like is the name of the variable I created. Could be anything else. Could be set favorite, could be set star, set something else. But here I used like as variable. And you see this in the API later on that the variable has the same name and it must be that way. As well, must be the state here active and the state here default for it to work. So when I do that, everywhere where this item is applied already has a like button. So what I will do now is to save this file and go to Bravo. And you see that the like button will actually appear here. So on the side, we have the live app. Let's just wait a minute. Yes, it is there. So right now I am just checking the live app. And you see that in the live app, this was not changed because we set versioning on. So this is now a version of it. So we are working on it. And here on the live version, we don't have it. But then I am going to open my Bravo Vision. And in Bravo Vision, we will be able to see that button. So it's loading. Let's see it. And now I see a bunch of hearts. And if I click on it, you see that it works, but it doesn't because it gives us an error. It's a remote action, it's missing. So we will add that remote action later on when Stuart actually teaches you how to build it with Comnoco. And the biggest deal here is that you will be able to download the file and follow all the steps. And if you have an app similar to this that just needs a like button, you will be able to do it yourself. Let's add now a button for the detail page. So here I also want the user to know if this is a like the style or not. I will go back to Figma. Here there is the detail page. I have a header basic that is this one that's repeated throughout the app. I have some items that I don't need anymore and I will just delete them. And now here I have the same as in the other. So it's a like item, state set like. And in here inside you have default and active, exactly the same style. If you need help with it or if you have any trouble setting up those icons, just let me know in the comments and share your file if you can. I can also do a very simple Figma file just with this like item and the set like. If you like that, just add in the comments as well. A lot of likes here. Okay, so since this is here, you see that already we have it on the detail page, and then you go back to Bravo, update it and check for the detail page here too. So it's there. So we already have a button. You go back to Bravo Vision, and if we click on it, it was not updated, so I will ask to update. And when I click on an item, yes, we have the heart there, and you see the same error than before. So this is the setup we need for the Figma. Now let's do the most important part. Stuart, that's with you.
So let's show you how Comnoco powers the ScarfApp backend. So Carla needed 3 API endpoints. The first is an endpoint that marks a scarf as liked or removes a like. And then the second thing that's needed is an endpoint that lists all the scarves and says whether the current user likes or not each of those scarves. And that's then used to display in the app the likes on the scarf list. And then the third one is when loading a single scarf, it's the ability to show whether that scarf has a like or not. So there are a couple of things that you need to note about how Bravo Studio and Airtable work. And the first, that users in Bravo Studio are represented by device ID. And that differs how Airtable has the users, which is using a record ID. So they need to be linked together. So you have an Airtable record ID linked to a Bravo Studio device ID. And the second thing is that Airtable true or false fields, when they're used by the Airtable API, if there's a false value, they don't actually return the field at all. So because of that, instead of using a true or false field, what we have is a field that is text, and it says default, which means there's no like, and active, which means there is a like. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the Airtable behind this. So what we have is one table called users, and in that we've got the Bravo device ID, like we said, and then we've got the Airtable record ID, and we also have a field called liked, which is where we will add an ID for each scarf that is liked by a particular user. We also have the scarf table, and this simply has a list of scarves which each have an ID, and then the details for each of them. And as you can see, it also shows you which of the users has liked each of these scarves. So this is what we're going to manipulate using Comnoco. So let's dive in and build this. Now, rather than starting completely from scratch in the interest of time, I'm going to cheat a little, and also it helps you. We're going to use one that I prepared earlier. So you can also import this template and follow along with me. To do that, I'll quickly take you through that process. So let's import the template so that you can start and follow along from the same place as me. So all you have to do is go to here, import from the URL, and use the link that's that's in the description underneath this video. Paste it in there. You can give your workspace a name, like so. Doesn't really need a description. Press import, and this will give you a blank workspace that contains the template files that we're going to use. Okay, so now we've imported that, let's dive in and get going. So if we open this workspace, the first thing we should do is go and add our secret or personal access token, API key, however you want to term it, into your workspace configuration. So you do that by coming into here, and then you simply add a secret. You give it a name. My mouse has stopped working. There we go. Give it a name, paste in your secret key or personal access token from Airtable, and then it's ready for you. Now, just remember to also do that for your production environment. So you just go in here and edit it. Now, I've already set these up. That's why I'm not doing it in real time. So once that's done, that's available for us to use. Now we can go back and we can start. Now, when you're building in Comnoco, you build everything in little functions, and they're just reusable components that you can use everywhere. So you build it once and reuse it. So you do that inside a function collection. So you would usually click here, create your own new one. But as we've already got this template, what we're going to do is open the one that's here. And it's called like. So this is a function collection, and it's got 3 functions in it. 2 I've just disabled so that they're less prominent while I talk you through it. But if we just expand this at the top, I've just set up a constant here, which is an API key. And in Comnoco, you add things by clicking on the add point and you start. So what I've done is I've added a secret on the tree, and that looks like that. And this is how you are going to be able to click on that and go and choose the API key you've just set up. In my case, it's that one. That now means that that's reused in these functions, and you can change it in one place and it will apply it everywhere you need. Okay, so remember I said there were 3 endpoints we needed. The first one was the ability to like or unlike on behalf of a user a scarf, a record. So this is what we call an API function. And you get that by clicking here and clicking add on an API function. And once that's added to this Comnoco tree, you can expand it, and you can always expand in Comnoco, you can always drill down, and you'll see certain things. Now, the important thing to start with is the input parameters. So this is where you say, when my app, Bravo Studio in this case, is going to call this API, I want it to give me these things. And so in our case, we want it to give us a device ID. We want it to give us a scarf ID. And then we want to say, are we liking it or are we unliking it? So it's true or false, yes or no, like or unlike. So to do that in your input parameters, you just click here, you choose what you want to be an input parameter, that puts it on the tree. And then you can go and set the default value here and the parameters. So what I've done on each of these is just made sure its type is a query parameter, so it goes in the query string and not part of the body or cookie or anything else. So that's what we've done. And the next thing I want to do is just paste some sample working data in. Now that data you can get from the Airtable base. You can see what you've got. But in our case, for the device ID, I've got an example here. And what I can do is I'm going to set a test value. And by setting a test value, it means it won't be saved when we save this project. All it's doing is setting it right now for us to trial out with test data. So I'll do the same with a Scarf ID. Let's just grab that and put it in a test value. There we go. So we've got some test data to work with, and I want to make sure that likes. Now what I should just do is check that I don't actually already have that one liked by the user. So if I go to the users table, WHGB it ended in, it's not in either of those, and this is a sample one I'm using. So I can now go back to Comnoco, and I'm happy I can use those for building. So that has defined the input to this API that we're building, that Bravo Studio is going to call, or the app is going to call. The next thing I want to do is define my logic, so what this function is going to do. So this is what I've defined. And it's basically just like a flowchart or a timeline. You basically it does these things sequentially, and it expands out onto them and goes into the branch and does other things. So basically you're creating this timeline of what you want Comnoco to do. So we've created our input parameters. Now also, if you're working with data, you can also create internal variables, places where you hold data while you're working with it, or values. So here I've added a couple of things, and they're both data structures. And data structures in Comnoco are a little bit of magic, because they allow you to hold everything from JSON data to database records, Airtable records, etc. And you'll see this come alive as we go through. So the first thing I'm doing is actually just logging. So this enables me when it runs to see what's happening. So I've just added a process group, which you click on the add point, and I can click process group. That just means it gives me a folder that I can expand and contract to logically group things together. And in that troubleshooting process group, I've done one thing. I'm adding just a log event. And in that log event, I could type something hard-coded like that. But what I've chosen to do is tick this box, which you get everywhere in Comnoco. And that has exposed the value onto the tree. So I've then essentially deleted that. And instead, I've dynamically built this up with a join text. So I type JT, and that brings that up, join text. And that's given me that. Now I can join various pieces of text together and create a sentence. So let's delete that one and show you the one I prepared, which is this. It's got the join text, and basically I'm logging and saying the device ID is this input device ID. And I can access that input device ID by clicking here, and Comnoco shows me everything that's like compatible with text, because I'm in a text slot. And here you can see in my input parameters, I've got the device ID. So I click there and it adds it to the tree, and there it is. Now I don't need that twice, so I'm going to delete it. And there we go. So basically I've built up this sentence that just tells me the device ID, the Scarf ID, which is that, the text, the like, which is true or false. And now we can move on and show you actually what it does with that. So the first thing it does is this. It searches for the user in the users table in Airtable, and it does it by looking up this device ID. Now in Comnoco, you can click here and you can do an API call, and that's what we're doing to Airtable. But if you do an API call and you want to see the response, you have to put it somewhere. And to put things places in Comnoco, you always use a set option. So if I type set, I've got a few types, and I'm using a set data structure. And then I can put my API call in, and I can set a target to put it in here, the user record ID. So that now is going to call the API and put it in there. Now the next thing is, what's the API call? So you can set this all up manually, or you can make it a bit easier and import from curl. So to do that, you can just go to Airtable's API documentation. And in their API documentation for the users table, for example, it says list records, and it gives you an example here in curl. So if I copy that, and then I simply go back to Comnoco and press import from curl, I can paste that in, and it will set up everything I need. So all I need to do now is add my API key token, which is this constant value, which is up here. There you see those are linked. And now that's ready. That's going to do that call and list those. So that's what this one is and how we set it up. So I'm just going to delete this. And you can see here, I just named it nicely, and I even edited it, edited the comment and put a nice comment in so that I can see what I'm doing. So that is what that one does. And we can run this. So if I click on the output, you'll see it's empty. If we now run it, once it's saved it, you'll see it will get these records from Airtable. And this is the response from Airtable. So this is the record, and it says that this device ID, Bravo device ID, is this Airtable record ID, and it's liked 2 scarves. Now, neither of those likes match the one that we are asking it to like. So in a minute, there'll be 3 values in there when we finish. That's what we want to achieve. So that's the first bit we've done. And as you can see, I'm able to run these things in isolation. And once I've run them, I can even see the logs. So you can click there, and it will open the logs and it will tell you what's happened. So if something does go awry, you can go in there, you can look in the logs. It's going to tell you what you've done wrong, and you can click on the block and it will take you to it. And that's how you can work out what's going on. So we've done that one. So now we want to either add or remove the like. And in this case, because it's true, we want to add a like. So for that, we've put an if-else block on the tree. So again, if you go here and you choose if-else, that's what it's given us. And in an if-else block, you can add one or more conditions. So it will try this, and if it doesn't match the criteria, it will try the next one. So we could add another one here, a return condition. And here you see when you add it, it says, what do you want to test, to whether to run this condition or not, and what do you want to do when you run this condition. So that's what this one is built from. So if I just delete this and expand this, you'll see what we do. So it's quite simple. This input is a true or false. So if it's true, then yes, we want to add a like, an item to the array. And basically we're adding it to this Airtable array here, as you can see. And you can choose that. Again, you click on the slot and you go and look at your data and say, I want to choose that one. And if you're wondering, I can't really see what I want there, click this and it will show you the whole record. But it grays out things that aren't compatible with this block, the particular slot you're in. So in our case, we've chosen that array. So all we're going to do is add another scarf ID to the array. And that's what happens if it's true, which it is in our case. If, however, this didn't match, or any of these conditions didn't match, then it will go to this slot, which is the else slot, and it will do this. And this would be, if this were false, which would be removing it. So again, you would give it the target array, and you would just tell it what to remove. So in our case, we want to remove this item number. So you give it the path within the array. And to do that, you just build your path. And it's a little funny here because what you have to do is tell it which item in the array to remove. So what we have to do is find the record that is in the array, see if it's number 0, number 1, number 2, number 3, and then put that in a join text, which will build the path. Now, in this case, it's not going to find the record. So we'll come back to this in 1 second. So for now, what we can do is we can run this, let's have a look at our user record here. As you can see, there are 2 items in the array. If we run this like now, go back to the user record when it's run, you'll see it's added 3 items to the array. So it's added a like just as we want. So if we were doing the opposite, if we were doing a false here, we would now be able to remove an item from the array. And this thing finds the index. So what it will do is it will say the one we're looking for is number 2, I assume. So if I run this, it should show it returns a 2. There it does. And therefore, if I run that, you'll see it will build the path to remove, which is 2. So essentially what this is doing is saying from this array, remove item number 2. And actually, if we run that, you should see it removes it. There we go. It's gone. So that's what happens if it's true, you are adding. If it's false, you're removing. So that's how we add a like or unlike to our data. But the next thing we need to do is add it back to Airtable, because we're only doing that in memory in Comnoco at the moment. We need to send that new record back to Airtable. So there's a couple of steps to this, again, sort of through the quirkiness of Airtable. So this record that Airtable has returned for us, whoops, I don't want to change that, this record here, it has a couple of things that if you give to Airtable, if you give this whole record back, it doesn't like. So one is the created time, and the other is the fields ID. This. So what we actually are doing now is we're going to use a remove item from object, and we're going to choose to remove from this object. We are going to remove created time, and then we're going to do it again, and we're going to remove fields ID. So if we go back and look at our user record and run this, you'll see those 2 fields go when we run this. There we go. So that's now given us a clean record that we can upload back to Airtable to update our database. Now what we should do is just run this previous step again to add a like, otherwise we won't see any difference in our Airtable base. So I'm just going to do that. Okay, right. So, whoops. So that's the first thing, which is removing the fields we don't want. And then we're just going to do an API call. Again, we set this up by copying and pasting the curl from Airtable's documentation. And in this one, it needs a request body because we're doing a method patch, which is how it updates an existing record. And the body is the object, and then we're simply pointing it to this response body. And again, we got that just by clicking on here, and we can go and choose it from our internal variables, and it's that we want. So we would select that, and that is what we already have here. And you can see what that looks like, because I can run just this body build, the build of the body data in isolation. And if I run that, you'll see that it builds this structure, which is what it sends to Airtable to update the record. So let's watch Airtable while we do this. And to do that, if I just drag Airtable to this window here, if you watch this record here while we run this, what we should see is another item added to it. There we go. So there's our item added to the like. So this user now likes a third scarf in the app. So that's successful. And then the final thing we're doing is sending in response to the API call that's calling this Comnoco API. We're going to give it a response. And that is whether we have, yes, we've liked it, or no, we haven't. So to do that, we've got a text field called like. And we are simply setting that as either active or default. Because if you remember, with Airtable, it's not great to work with a true or false. So we're working with text that is active or default. And again, we've done that just by saying, if the request coming in says I want it true, then it's active. Otherwise, in this else, on this if else, I want it to false. So if we run that, you'll see this output parameter will get set to active. And that's it. That's done what we want. So we could reverse that. Let's see if this will update in real time for us this time. So if we go in here and we set this to test data, we set this to false. Let's run this again. This time I'm going to run the entire function because I've got the inputs I want. Let's run that. There we go. And you can see it's removed it. So there's our like and unlike. That's the first of our 3 endpoints. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, let's move on to the second of the endpoints we want. So let's just minimize that one, and I will uncomment this one, which I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut for. So now we're going to work on this list with likes. So if I expand that, it's quite similar. So again, I've defined some inputs, which is a device ID and a view. And this is the device ID that is going to be listing, i.e. the user, so the Bravo device ID. So again, I'm going to set this test value, give it my device ID. And the view, this is fine. Actually, this is the Airtable view that it's going to call. And in our case, we're just going to hard code it or default it to all. If you want to change that in the API input call, you can. So we've got those 2 inputs. And then again, I've defined some internal variables. So one is the user's record ID. The other is the list of scarves. And the other is the status of the like. And this will be for each scarf as we loop through them. I'll keep updating this and reusing it. And then our output parameters is the list of records. Again, so another data structure with a list of records. Okay, so again, we go down to this logic section here, and this is where we're going to build what we do. And once again, we're logging out what we're doing. After that, we're going to get the user record, searching on the Bravo ID. So for this, again, we're doing our API call, and we're sending in some query parameters as part of the call. This is, again, because we've set it up using curl, which we've pasted in from Airtable, and the query parameters we've got are these, the max records and the view. So they get set up in here, and then we tick that button and it puts them on the tree, and you can see what they are. And this allows us to dynamically map them. So the filter formula, and this is Airtable specification, is where the device ID equals this incoming device ID, which again, just to remind you, you can get by clicking here, and you click on device ID, and that puts it on the tree. So we're building that query, and that's what's telling Airtable which record to return. So if we run this in isolation, you'll see it will go from an empty record, and it will go to populated with the value from Airtable. And once we've got that, we've got our user again. So once we've got that record, we know that this user has liked these 2 scarves, but the purpose for this endpoint is to list all the scarves, but just put a like flag against these 2 because this user likes them. So the next thing we need to do is quite similar. We get a list of all the scarves from Airtable. So again, it's an API call, set up the curl, and it sends it to this scarf list. So if we run that, the scarf list will get populated. And as you can see, we've got loads of scarves, and each one has information about them. The images, etc., the instructions, all of that stuff. So that is that's given us our list of scarves. But what this is missing is whether or not the current user has liked the scarf, and that's what we're going to add. So before we do that, we just want to check that this user has liked any scarves before, because if the user hasn't, they're not going to be in the table of users, because there's no linked Bravo ID to Airtable ID. So this here just checks to see, did this search for a user return any records? So are there more than one records in this array? Which we expect one if the user exists, otherwise not. So basically what we do is we've got a little bit of logic here, and we've got a number comparison. And we say that if the count of records in that array is equal to 0, then there are no records, and we know that we need to create the user in the table. Otherwise, do nothing. And to create the user, again, it's another API call to Airtable, set up by pasting in the curl commands that we got from the documentation. But basically, it just adds the user, and it will dynamically, in the request body, we're adding the device ID that we need to create. And that will add our user. But in our case, we know we have a user, so we don't need to run this. But that just makes sure there's a user. And now what we want to do is loop through each of those scarves that we got in the scarf list. And if the user's liked one of them, we need to set it to active. Otherwise, we set it to default, and we add a field for that. So here we go. We've got a loop. And in the loop, let's just clear this because it's hard to see. So in this loop, we can loop through data. So when you put a loop on the tree, you can then, in this slot, you can say what you want to loop through. And in our case, we want to loop through all the records that are coming. So here we go. We loop through the scarf list and through each record. And that shows you what you're looping through, the scarf list and each record. And if we want to see what the current record is for the loop, you can sort of step through them. So if we just set this to get the second record in the list, because lists always start at 0, here you can see this is the value of the second record. So you can pick and choose the record you want when you're working in a loop, just for development, for testing. So now we've got some sample data loaded. What we can do is we can set this default or active. And you can see I've just named this block default or active so that it makes sense when we look at it. And this again is, if I hover there, it will tell you it's an if else block, and it's on the from slot of a set text. So we're setting this text and we're setting the like status here. So you may remember I said that as we loop through for each block, we're using this temporarily to know whether it's default or active. Has the user liked it? And to do that test, it's just here we go, is this test here, which is comparing numbers. So the numbers we're comparing are find the index of an item in the array. So is the value of the scarf ID, is the ID for the current user in there? So does the user like that scarf? If they don't, it won't exist, and it will return -1, which means it will be default. They don't like it. And if it does, it won't return -1, it will return the index. And that means that this won't match to true. So this condition won't run, and instead it will set it to active. So that just sets this temporary flag. And then when we've got that, we now want to add that to the record, the current record we're on. So we just use this object here called an add item to object. And again, you would choose that by just clicking on the add point if it was empty, or going in here, and you can scroll down and find it, or you can type, there it is, add item to object. So that's what we've used. So that block then has 3 slots. The item to add, so we know what that is. That's this one we've just set. Like status, you can see, so it's that. So we're adding that. We're calling it like, so that's a field we're adding with this value called like, and we're adding it to the fields for this scarf. So this scarf's going to have a new field in a second. So if we run this loop, there we go, we'll run this loop, it will go through each record and it will update what we want. So if we now go to the scarf list in each record, you will see like active, so the users liked that one. Like active, the users liked that one. Like default, the user hasn't liked that scarf. So we've added that field. So that's given us what we want. So now we just want to return that to the response of the API call, so that the Bravo app can use that information. So we're simply now going to take the response, the records from the scarf list, which is this. And again, I've chosen that just by clicking on the add point, choosing the records and selecting that, and then setting it to our output data structure. So we're saying just send that to the response, and that gives us what we need. So if we run this whole thing now, we will see that this output records, which is empty when we started, will fill with the records with the likes and not likes as we require. There we go. So this first one has a like active. I think we knew the second one has a like active, and the third one is default. So that's done what we need. So that's great. So now we have the ability to list all of the scarves and add our likes or not. And so the final endpoint we have is just for Bravo to be able to call a single scarf. And it basically does the same thing. But instead of a list, just a single scarf. So we take the device ID in and the scarf ID, and then we basically do exactly the same thing, but instead of doing a loop, we just do it once on that one scarf. So that gives us our 3 endpoints, and please feel free to explore. Please get in touch with me at Comnoco. We've got a great Discord channel that you can join and ask any questions, and we try and jump in and help you. This should give you something fun to play with Bravo and Airtable. But we're not quite done, because what we've done so far is built these functions, but we haven't turned them into API endpoints. So we need to do that next. So to do that, the hint really is up here, but what you can do is you can click this button and you can create a trigger file. So create one called likes. I'm going to press cancel because we do already have that. So if I go back to the dashboard, we can see these triggers. Now I'll open up this first one called likes. And this is what we call a trigger in Comnoco. And when you're in Comnoco, you can choose, am I creating an API? Am I creating a webhook? Or am I running a scheduled task? And for all of them, what you end up doing is you end up mapping a function that you've created. So you go to this add point and you say, I want to connect like unlike to this head method. I'm not going to do that because what we want is this and this. So that allows us to say that on the get endpoint of this API, I want to list everything with likes. And on the patch endpoint, I want to like or unlike a particular item. Now, the reason our third endpoint is not in there is because we want it to be another get. And there's, in Comnoco at the moment, you can only have one of each type in each trigger file. So we've just got a second trigger file. It basically does the same thing, but this time you can add the retrieve with like, which is the single record with a like. And then in each of these triggers, we now need to set that up to run for your workspace, because hopefully you've imported this and you're working along with me. So that's why this is empty. So in a Comnoco trigger, you always have to add your authority to be able to run this trigger in your workspace. Otherwise, the trigger won't be allowed to access your secrets, etc. So you simply click here. And you've got a few choices. We'll skip over advanced auth, but the key ones are, you could say only people with an API key can call this, or you can say, I want to make it public. Anyone can call this endpoint. And that's what we're going to do today. So you click on that. And then what you have to do is you have to say, right, I'm not going to ask in this API for anyone to send an API key or anything, but I do have to tell it to run as a service user, which is like a machine user that has access to my workspace. So in your case, you're going to need to set one up. So we just click here to add a new service user, and then you can click add here, and you can give your service user a name and tell it that you want it to be allowed to run your ScarfApp in production. So you make sure you tick that box basically. And then when you add that user, you end up with something that looks like this. And now you've got that, you can go back here and you can select the service user and you can say, yep, NocodeKraft, that service user, select service user. So that's now done. You've said that it will run without, it will be public, but when it runs, it's going to be allowed to access that workspace. And then a good tip is just to turn that on, which means it won't be paused when you publish it. So go and do the same for your likes. Here, we're going to add no auth. We're going to choose our service user that we've already set up. Select that service user. Turn it on. And now we can simply publish. So you can click this. And what it will do when you press publish is ask if you want to save all your changes, which I do. So now I've saved my changes. What this is going to give us is secure, well, actually publicly open endpoints in this case, scalable endpoints running on Comnoco. So that's done. Now you can go to the status screen. There's a link there, or it's here. We can go to the status screen and you can see your two triggers running. And in fact, you can see, in my case, I can see how much they've run. So if we go to one of these, you can click on the specification. And this gives you an open API specification, which you can then give to other systems to be able to connect. But it's quite cool as well, because it also allows you to trial them out. So in here, I can see on this get endpoint, the view, which defaults to all. So I can click try it out. It's just put all in there. And then a device ID, which I have on my other screen. There we go. Let's paste that in. Right, so if I run this, aha, trigger is not running. It's quite correct. It's paused. I must have forgotten to click the button. So I'm just going to run it. Now it's running. Start that again. Let's try it out. Or paste the device ID in, press run. Now the trigger is running. What we should see is a response. And here we go. Yeah, we've got all of our records from Airtable, and they should have the injected like field, which they do. So that's great. That's working. And you can do that for the other two endpoints. But what you can also do, now you've run it, you should be able to click refresh and you will see your chart here. And here you can see what was run for the day. So here we can see, if we expand it, this is what it's doing and this is how it's run, and it's great. It's worked. That's what we want to see. So that's job done. And this is how Comnoco is the backend for the ScarfApp.
Thank you, Stuart. That was a great explanation. And I hope you have done the step-by-step with him on Comnoco on your account so that you can implement this like button for your own app as well. So now let's go to Bravo and check those 3 items that Stuart had created. So if we go to account collections, you see here my Airtable database. That is exactly this one. And you see what I have here is like a list of scarves, and I have several views, and Stuart has created a place where I just put the view and then I get that view on. So this much simpler API request, because then I can also manipulate which view I want to have the items coming from. Then I have here users liked, that is related to the users from this site. And I have a bunch of tests here going on too. I can delete all of them. Great. So you see, actually they will be created again because they will be requested here. I have a list items that is like a listing all the likes for this device ID that I added here in that test values. And the view that I am asking for, it's all. So I could get any of other grill views here. So all, head, neck, rectangle, triangle. So I will do it for the all view. And when I click send, what happens is that this is requesting Comnoco for the list of all the scarves I have to check if with that device ID it's true or false, and creating that field exactly like you did. Great, so we have here the results. Then here is an item detail at Comnoco, that is exactly this one on the side, that if you have the heart there or not. So you already have a device ID, that's the one it's open, and then you have the scarf ID, that is the one that you actually have the record from. Then you can also hit send. I'm testing here these values, so it is checking if this is true or false, and you can see that this is like and this like is the false, so it means that it's off. And then I have the turn on and turn off that I called here a patch function that's called like off and like on. So when my like is off, I will turn it on by saying the device ID, the scarf ID, and saying that like is true. And when my scarf is on, if I touch it again, it will turn it off. And then I have also the device ID, scarf ID, and like is false. So now how we bind those into our app? Very simple. This is the detail page, so we can start from there. Here we have the like item, and then we have the default and the active. So when it's active, remember we just talked about it, so you want to turn it off, so like off. And then I will be setting a variable, setting state, and this set state that I would set is like, and that is the exact name I added to that item. Remember, I spoke about that. I can show you later on too. And then in here, when it's an error, I will just like show an alert. Oops, there was an error. I will copy this because I will have to do the same thing for the other one. So here I set the like status as off. And then I come to default, and then default I will set it as on. So like on, and then I use set state, and my state that I will set is like, and then on the error I will show an alert that oops, there was an error. So I will show you again the like on and off. So you see that actually the only select data here is like, because you don't need any other. The only function here is that this like you be default or active, like a true or false, default or active for this item that you send, the device ID and the scarf ID. And on Figma, for you to recall, this is the way it's set. So we have here the state set like, active action removed, and action removed for default as well. And active is on top and default is on bottom. So let's test it and check it out. So we come to our app, we refresh this. Before we go testing, the only thing we need after setting it as active and default will be to set this item here as also as like. So this is the item detail, and in there we have an item that is like. So now let's test it. Refresh it here on Bravo Vision. Then you click to see, turn it on, turn it off. No error happened. So now you see that actually if I turn it on, the device ID, it's receiving a true or false. So your like button is working. Let's do that for the list now. If we come to all scarves, this is the list that is going. It's already getting it from Comnoco. Then you come to the like item, you add here the like state. Then in default, I will say that I want it off, actually on, right? It's default, so I want it on. And then I want to set state exactly like the other, and then set like, and also show an alert, exactly like that. Then on active, I want to set it off. So now like off, and then I will set state, like, and also show an alert. So when it's active, when you click, you must remove it from active, so it you turn off. You set the like as false, and if there is an error, it will become an error. If it is default, then you turn it on, and set like state you receive on. And then on default you have, when the heart is empty, when you touch it, you turn it on, and it will set the state from like as a true, and if there is an error you will throw out an error. And the like item, we are already checking for the like, so it's the default state, it is showing true or false, that comes from the list. Let's check on Bravo, refresh it, and everything must be looking empty because I didn't touch anything. But now I need to touch the first item. Yes, the third item, the fourth item. Oh, great, right? So I will close it just for you to see that these are staying there. And also show you here on Airtable, we already have 3 items that we clicked on. The 3 items are there. And if we click to see the detail page, it should be filled in too. And if we go to an item that has it not filled, we could fill it in, and you see it's adding it there. And if we come to the other view, it should also fill it. Great, that is working. So this is the tutorial for you to create your own like button. The only thing that we need to do right now to make it live is to come back to versioning, remove versioning, and publish it. I hope this was helpful to you and that you create your own like button for your app. So Stuart, any last words?
So great, yeah, happy to have helped here. You know, this is really just the tip of the iceberg with what you can do with Comnoco. You know, it will work with any front end, any app builder, any database of your choice. And as you saw, this was quite a sort of quirky and unique use case, and it was quite easy to do with Comnoco. So if you want help with your Bravo Studio app project or your Airtable project or any other project, you know, we'd love to have you on board. We'd love to show you what Comnoco can do to help you out. So please do come and give it a go. Anyone can get started for free via our website at comnoco.com. Just sign up and get going. And if you want a little bit of help building, or you want to ask questions or just talk to us, we do have a Discord channel which you can find through the app in the top right or on our website. So yeah, thank you, Carla, for this little challenge. Bring on the next one. It was a pleasure.